Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, the Dodgers won so big again that Hanser Alberto pitched for a second straight day. Andrew Heaney strikes out double digits for a second straight start. And Joey Gallo, Cody Bellinger had some good nights. We'll get into that. And we'll get into Dave Roberts' comments on the bullpen and who will be closing out games for the Dodgers come October. That's what's on tap, so make sure to keep it Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers, and make it easy on yourself and subscribe in all those places, and you'll never miss a day because you know we're not going to. We're here for you every weekday, Monday through Friday. If this is your first time listening or watching, I'm Vince Samperio. That's my co-host, Jeff Snider. And we are both lifelong Dodger fans that have spent time covering the Dodgers in a variety of ways, continue to cover the Dodgers in a variety of ways. And one of those ways is this here podcast right here. We've been doing this podcast for a while, and we'll continue on for as long as they allow us to. And what we do on this podcast is talk about the Dodgers, and that's what we're going to get into right now. The Dodgers won. Final score ended up being 12-6, but the game was out of hand pretty early. Caleb Ferguson gave up a couple runs, and then Hanser Alberto, who was pitching back-to-back nights, ended up giving up a home run, a 2-run home run as well. Blamed Austin Barnes after the game for calling a breaking ball. But all in all, it was another one of those fun games where the Dodgers put up a lot of runs early. The game started an hour earlier than normal, and it ended up finishing faster, but it was tracking early on to be just as long or finish at the same time as the normal 7 p.m. games. But either way, like I said, a lot of fun. We'll get into a couple things offensively right here in this segment, and then talk about Andrew Heaney, who's now had back-to-back starts with double-digit strikeouts. And then later on, we'll get into some comments from Joey Gallo on coming to the Dodgers, some comments from Dave Roberts on who will close out games when it matters for the Dodgers. But yeah, Jeff, I mean, there's a few things to get into this game. Obviously, offensively, the Dodgers did very well. A lot of people had hits, a lot of people had RBIs. But yeah, kind of wherever you want to take it from there offensively.
Yeah, it was a really good game offensively for the whole team. Everybody in the starting lineup had either a run scored or an RBI, if not both. Austin Barnes drove in 4 runs somehow. For me, one of the key at-bats of the game came in the first inning. Cody Bellinger was up with bases loaded, and he had a 3-1 count. And, he's sitting dead red, 3-1, and the pitch is outside by a couple inches. And he takes it for ball 4, driving a run. Umpire called it a strike. And, Bellinger was visibly upset about the call, actually said a little something to the umpire. And Bellinger, of all the Dodgers players, sometimes you worry about, head case isn't the right word. I don't know enough about Cody to diagnose him like that, but he does seem like sometimes he can get in his own head a little bit. And what we saw then was he then hit a 2-run double down the right field line, stayed in it, and actually ended up with a better outcome than if the umpire had been better at his job. And, that was a huge hit. The Dodgers were up 2-1. The walk would have made it 3-1. Instead, the double made it 4-1. And there's a big difference. If he had gotten that bad call and then struck out because he was upset, and the Dodgers are only up 2-1, there's a big difference between 2-1 and 4-1. And ultimately, maybe it wouldn't have mattered because the Dodgers did score plenty more runs, but it also kind of set the tone for what kind of game it was going to be. It made Adrian Hauser throw some more pitches that inning. It helped get him out of the game earlier, all that stuff. And so, I don't know. I feel like that at bat right there really set the tone for the game.
Yeah, and sometimes that's all it takes. Bellinger ended up getting on base 3 times in the game, 2 hits and a walk. And then Trace Thompson came in for him, and then he hit a double. So that spot in the lineup was hot. He had a couple more hits from Trey, a couple more hits from Freddie. a couple hits from JT. Dodgers spread the wealth around. Even Austin Barnes came through with the home run and an RBI single. So, yeah, all in all, that part was fun. And who were they supporting with all those runs? It was Andrew Heaney. Andrew Heaney, who ended up going 6 innings, striking out 10, back-to-back starts against the Brewers, back-to-back starts with 10 strikeouts. ERA on the season now sitting at 1.94. He pitched, I think he got up to 90 pitches, which is probably the most he's thrown in a game this season. He's looking like he's going to remain healthy, hopefully, and continue to pitch pretty well. Last time out, mixed bag, but did get the 10 strikeouts the time before that. Not as great, but has settled down. And, it's really going to be, over this last month or so, it's going to be very interesting if everyone stays healthy and the guys that are supposed to come back, come back. The Dodgers are going to have a lot of decisions to make on the pitching, which is not necessarily a bad thing because it means they have too many pitchers that are worthy of being on an October roster and not enough spots.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 91 pitches for Heaney was his season high. He actually threw 89 in his last start against the Brewers last week and 89 in his second start of the season against the Reds, which was the other time that he went 6 full innings. So yeah, definitely his, probably his second best start of the season after that game against the Reds, his second start of the season when he struck out 11 in 6 innings and only allowed the 1 hit. But overall, just a great game for him. And the first inning, it makes us a little nervous. Christian Yelich hits a deep fly out on the first pitch of the game. Next batter hits a home run opposite field. And, we talked last week after Heaney's game that his home run rate this year has been a lot lower than his career rate. And anybody who's followed Andrew Heaney the last few years will tell you that home runs are his issue. And so to see him give up a home run in the first inning after giving up 3 home runs in his last start, like, oh no, not this again. But then he really settled down and settled in. And I'm sure getting 4 runs of support in the bottom of the first did not hurt at all. They were able to kind of take some of that load off. I think scoring, let's see, while he was in the game, the Dodgers scored 10 runs, and really the 11th and 12th runs came before anybody else had pitched. And so he had basically stress-free after that top of the first inning. He was stress-free, which definitely helps, but he really settled in, missed a lot of bats, got 10 strikeouts, and just looked really, really good. And, I don't have anything against the Yankees. I'm not quite old enough to remember when the Dodgers and Yankees were actually a rivalry, but it sure does sound fun to play the Yankees in the World Series and have Andrew Heaney and Joey Gallo contribute to the Dodgers beating the Yankees in the World Series,
Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah, I mean, Yankee fans growing up when they were good, and then I knew more Yankee fans. And if you listen to this podcast, you know that for me, when I don't like a team, it's mostly because of their fans, not so much the actual team for the most part, other than like the Giants. And I've had pretty decent things with Giant fans, but yeah, that would be great. And then just real quick on the bullpen side, Bruce Dargado pitched again, struck out 2. He got 4 outs, struck out 2 of them. So it's back-to-back appearances with multiple strikeouts, something he hasn't really done much before. So I don't know if it's a matter of the Brewers aren't as good as hitting, or Gratterall has maybe figured something out a little bit, or has changed a little bit of sequencing. But good looks there. And then real quick, Caleb Ferguson didn't make it out of his inning, gave up 2 hits, walked 2. Ended up giving up 2 runs. That's now 2 of his last 3 appearances where he's given up at least a run after not allowing to run the entire rest of the season. Have you seen anything different? You think there's any concern there? And do you think, obviously everyone in the bullpen is kind of pitching for October to auditioning. We'll get into more about like the specific bullpen later, but just Ferguson, have you seen anything different? Or it's just a matter of this was bound to happen anyways?
Yeah, I don't have any major concerns. I might be more concerned if he went into the postseason with a 0 ERA in the regular season. They say the one thing that winning doesn't teach you is how to lose, and the one thing that throwing shutout innings doesn't teach you is how to bounce back from allowing runs. And this inning tonight very easily could have been a shutout inning. Joey Gallo probably should have caught the 2-run double, but it would have been a nice catch. It's not to say that Ferguson allowed 2 hits and 2 walks, and so the runs are definitely on him. Even if that other one's hit or caught, he's still 1 hit and 2 walks. But yeah, I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on. But honestly, I feel like it's probably a good thing right now for him to go through some of these bumps and bruises and figure some things out when the games don't matter.
Yeah. All right, we're going to get into Joey Gallo, his comments about coming to the Dodgers, kind of how he was embraced, how the Dodgers as a team embraced him, how the organization embraced him, and just how we've seen that play out on the field. But first, let's talk about driving sober. You're hanging out with some friends, maybe at a Dodger game, and a few becomes a few too many. And as the game comes to an end, people start to head out. You think of calling for a ride, think of getting that Uber, catching the bus, whatever you want to do. But no, you say you live nearby, you can make it home okay. It's not a big deal. What are the odds that you get pulled over? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car. Well, how about if you kill someone? Everyone knows about the risk of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again, play it safe, and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. All right, Jeff. So Joey Gallo had an RBI double. He has maintained his OPS over 1,000 since joining the Dodgers. He continues to still strike out at a high rate, but he's doing more in his other at bats when he doesn't strike out, which is the main difference from his time as a Yankee. And before the game, he talked with Kirsten Watson, and maybe got a glimpse into why that is. I believe you have the full quote of what he said about the Dodgers, the team bringing him in and embracing him, but also the organization bringing him in and embracing him.
Yeah, Kirsten first asked him, how much fun he's having basically. And he said it's been a lot of fun. Obviously, I didn't really know what to expect coming over. I was excited for a new start somewhere, but the guys have been great. They just welcomed me in with open arms. I feel like I've been here all year. There's no better place to be than LA. We're winning, great weather, great teammates. So it's been really exciting. And then he followed up. He said, when I got here, they really had a plan for me. I was kind of surprised by that. I figured I'd show up and not really know what my place was going to be. But as soon as I got here, they sat me down, told me what my role was, what they wanted me to do, changes that I could make that could help me. It's just been a laid back environment. It's intense and we want to win, but it's very calm. And I think that helps. It kind of puts your nerves at ease and just go out there and play baseball. And I thought that was really interesting perspective from Gallo, that he didn't expect the Dodgers to be as prepared for him as they were. And it gives you an insight into the Dodgers that, we talk a lot about how their entire top to bottom organization is integrated in. They draft players who they know they can develop well and all of that. Well, this shows that they also are integrated when it's looking at who should we acquire. They didn't say, "Oh, Joey Gallo made a couple all-star teams in Texas. He's probably good. Let's go get him." They said, "Let's look at Joey Gallo. Ooh, we identified some things. We think that he can be better with us because for whatever reason, obviously nobody's going into detail about what tweaks they've made because that's part of the secret sauce. But the fact that the Dodgers had done the homework before they traded for him and said, we're going to go get Joey Gallo because we think because of A, B, and C, he can be a lot better with us than he's been with the Yankees. And the impact that had on Gallo to set him at ease and say, wow, they believe in me. It's one thing if you show up and you think a team got traded for you just because you made a couple all-star teams a couple of years ago, that's not helping your confidence any right now when you're batting 159 or whatever. But to actually be traded for and have the team that got you say, we brought you in because we think this is what you can be. Here's the things that we think we can do to help you be that. That's got to be in addition to all the other things that make it better to play in LA than in New York. That organizational approach has to really be reassuring. And I think that's got to be part of the reason we're seeing the results on the field,
I mean, you look at last year when the Yankees traded for Gallo, and it was because he was coming off an all-star appearance, because he had the good numbers, and because they thought he was going to help the team, And yes, there's times, when the Dodgers trade for a guy like Mookie Betts, even Trey Turner, they might have slight things that they have about them, but realistically, they're trading for the talent. And last year the Yankees probably traded for the talent more so than anything else. They didn't think what was going to happen happened. Now, the Dodgers, who knows when they started this, do they have something like a quick notebook? I'm sure that they have a quick notebook on everyone as a way to attack them at the plate, but do they have a like notebook on every player or most players of, okay, if we got them, or hey, if he became available, what could we do or how could we help them? I'm sure they have that to a certain extent. I'm sure it opened up a little bit more in the last few weeks when it was kind of made clear that the Yankees weren't going to keep Gallo. And it was almost to the point where you thought they might DFA him, and the Dodgers maybe took advantage, started looking some stuff up, started checking out his stuff, put someone on the task of figuring out how to fix them, and that was the case there, and it all worked out. And for us, we saw Gallo for Clayton Beater come out of nowhere, for a guy who's struggled a lot and hasn't really contributed. But for the Dodgers, this might have been something they've had in their mind for weeks already at this point, with specific reasons of why they want to trade for him, what they can do for him, and how they think it'll work out. And yeah, while it hasn't been, oh my God, Joey Gallo's all of a sudden the best hitter in baseball and not striking out and everything else. Like I said, he's still striking out, but he's not doing things, or he's doing positive things with the rest of his at bats. In 82 games, 233 at bats. He had 4 doubles as Yankee. He has 2 doubles in the Dodger and 35 at bats. Same amount of triples, 3 homers with the Dodgers, 12 with the Yankees. 9 hits in 35 at bats and 37 hits and 233 at bats with the Yankees. So, clearly something changed, and it's probably the mindset as well. Yankee fans didn't treat him very well. Yankee fans have moved that anger onto Aaron Hicks now. So if the Dodgers go after Aaron Hicks at some point, maybe that's they're going after the guys that confidence is ruined and they can bring him over here. Dodger fans have embraced him. Obviously, he's done well. And he's OPSing over 1,000. OPSing obviously way less at bats, but OPSing better than Juan Soto's OPSing as a Padre. And yeah, I mean, on the Padre front, they saw the Dodgers take 4 out of 7 from the Brewers, and they pretty much didn't really. I think they lost ground in those 10 days where the Dodgers started playing them. So yeah, just a quick note on that because the Dodgers were playing the people chasing the Padres. But yeah.
Yeah, his OPS isn't just better than Juan Soto's. It's 112 points better than Juan Soto's since their respective acquisitions. Yeah, this whole concept is one of the reasons I would love to have Andrew Friedman on the podcast. I think it would be fascinating just to hear the ins and outs of what was the front office conversation like. When did it start? When did they start thinking, oh, Joey Gallo's probably going to be available. I wonder if he might be a guy, and who they put on it. Did they put their best people on it, or did and I think they would be really interesting conversation. So Andrew, if you're watching or listening, hit me up. My DMs are open if you want to come on the show. I don't think you'd have to give away too many secrets to have that conversation. I was just looking. Clayton Beater's actually done really well with the Yankees. He's had 3 appearances, total of 6 and a third. No, 7 and a third innings, 2 hits, no runs allowed. So maybe it was a win-win trade, good trade for both sides. But yeah, Joey Gallo has just been everything we could have hoped for, personality-wise, on the field-wise, and obviously he's happy, and he's a guy who it's easy to root for sure.
And content-wise, the Hanser Alberto IG stories featuring Joey Gallo have become a fan favorite very quickly, and even made it to the Dodgers main page the other day as Hanser took over during the Dodgers photo day. So yeah, he's been
Hanser.
He's been great all around. And now we'll get into the bullpen and some comments Dave Roberts made that were a little more revealing than previous comments about the closer position and closing in October. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day, and we will return with bullpen talk. All right, Jeff. So Dave Roberts, who has been adamant that Craig Kimbrel is still the closer, and we had a conversation about it after one of the Kimbrel implosions, and just how Dave Roberts continued to say, he's going to be the closer and everything else, and we weren't surprised. We know that Dave Roberts' playbook by this point. He's not going to do anything that puts anyone in a weird position, especially one of his players. But they asked him about who will close out games for the Dodgers in October. And this was the quote. He said, quote, "I don't know right now. My expectation, my hope is it's Craig Kimbrel, obviously. But like I said, it should be a meritocracy. It should be about performance. And I do believe that if he's closing games, we're better for it. And yeah, we have both said on this podcast that if Craig Kimbrel is good and being the closer for the Dodgers, then that's their best version because everyone else gets to be deployed in a variety of ways. But this is the first time that it wasn't instant. Craig Kimbrel is the closer type of thing, and a little bit different than even with Jansen struggling in the past, and even with us kind of knowing that in 2020 he wasn't always the guy that was closing out big games and things like that. Roberts never really said anything like this, so it is an interesting quote by him, but it's also one that you know is the correct way to approach it, especially here with the last 5-6 weeks of the season left, and they're gonna have to make some big decisions here in the next 5-6 weeks on who will actually be pitching in October in general.
Yeah, and honestly, this quote is 100% in line with what we've been saying their approach would be. And on it, like, I don't know how to say this nicely. I know some of the people watching and listening to this think Dave Roberts is a terrible manager. So don't take this personally when I say everybody who isn't already obsessed with how bad Dave Roberts is knew that this would be the approach the Dodgers were going to take, because as it turns out, Dave Roberts actually is a very good manager. And one of the things we've talked about repeatedly on this podcast is the one big difference is they don't have that emotional baggage that they had with Kenley Jansen. There was with Kenley Jansen, they had to dance around his feelings. They had to be gentle with him, and so they had to be careful what they said, and not even in a bad way. Just they had the history with the guy. Kenley Jansen is the Dodgers' all-time leader in saves. He had earned a lot of leeway and had earned that respect from the Dodgers organization. And what we saw in 2020 was Dave Roberts didn't really care. He went with who's our best option to close this out. And, that's why Julio was standing on the mound at the end of both the NLCS and the World Series. Ultimately, but they had to be careful about what they said. And Roberts is very good at talking to the media in a way that doesn't hurt his players' feelings. It can be infuriating for the media because and for fans, the media, because he often doesn't say anything real, and for fans because he doesn't say exactly what they want him to say. But I saw several people after this quote from Roberts came out on Wednesday saying, finally, Dave Roberts is finally listening to us. It's like, no, this has always been the approach. This was always going to be the approach. The only difference is somebody actually asked the question differently, because before it's always been, is Craig Kimbrel still the closer? Yeah, he's still the closer. Yeah, we're going to keep trying to get him, but when somebody said, who's going to close games in October? Well, the answer is, I don't know. And I hope it's Craig Kimbrel. And you and I both hope it's Craig Kimbrel, because that means that Craig Kimbrel has turned it around and earned that spot. Dave Roberts hopes that it's Craig Kimbrel for that same reason. But if Craig Kimbrel doesn't turn it around, it won't be Craig Kimbrel. So while this was a new thing for Dave Roberts to say out loud, it also was not new at all to people who have been paying attention, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, with Dave Roberts, it ultimately comes down to, and kind of with most managers in general, they at least the good ones, or the good ones, the player managers, I guess you would say, are good at not saying things that hurt or embarrass players. But with Roberts, it's always been action over words. He can say a lot of things and say the right things, but we can see the action. Even though his wording was that Craig had thrown 3 out of 5 games that one night, and so he let Evan Phillips close it out. Realistically, 3 and 5 isn't crazy amount, especially for Kimbrel, who hasn't thrown that much this season, and especially knowing that in October there's going to be back to back games at a couple points. So that action right there, letting Evan Phillips close out a game, that was the first one where you're like, okay, that's the action, not the words that he said, but the action. And this is kind of what this quote is. It's you can take it off. This one you can take more at face value because it's exactly what he's talking about. But other times when he's saying things, it's more about the action. Now with Kenley in the past, like you mentioned, it was a little bit different. They did handle things different, but when it came down to it in October, the action spoke louder than the words that he had previously said. And this is where this sits. And he's done this for a bunch of guys, and he's done it for offense. With Muncy, if Muncy, they obviously still had faith in him, and that was true, and the words were true. But if we had seen him give Muncy some extra rests here and there as time went on, he would still publicly black Muncy with his words, but his actions would say, we are losing a little bit of faith in Muncy. We're going to try some other guys out, and that's how things are going to go. And, I think really the only time we've seen that is 2018, where they completely went to like the complete platoon line shifts. These guys are going to start if it's a right-handed starter, and as soon as someone else comes in or a lefty comes in, we're going to switch them all out, and vice versa. But for the most part, the Dodgers have had the patience and been rewarded for it. It's not that often that they don't get rewarded for it, but in the sense of the closer role the last few years, that's where it's kind of been more action than words.
Yeah, and I might see the action and words thing a little bit differently than you do. That night when Evan Phillips got the save opportunity, I think that Roberts was being entirely honest that their goal right now isn't for Craig Kimbrel to get saves. Their goal is for Craig Kimbrel to get to a spot where he can get saves in October, and basically, it's a lot more important for him to be used correctly right now than to be used in save situations. And I think that's what Roberts was saying, and what his actions and his words said was that, yeah, our goal is for Craig Kimbrel to close out the last game of the World Series. And in order to do that, we need to get him consistent and predictable, maybe not predictable, but, consistent and enough rest and enough action to get him right. I was actually shocked that he didn't pitch in this game against the Brewers on Wednesday night, simply because he hasn't pitched since Sunday. And I actually promised Javi from Locked On Padres, he asked me if he should pick up Craig Kimbrel in his fantasy league because he needs saves. And I told him, I said, I think he's still going to get plenty of save opportunities, but it's going to be more of he's going to pitch when they need him to pitch as far as usage goes. And I told Javi, so no matter what happens in Wednesday's game, Craig Kimbrel's going to pitch. And I was really surprised with the day off on Thursday that he didn't pitch. And maybe it was, they got caught up in the Hanser mania. But yeah, I do think their number one goal right now is to get him the work, to get him right, and not care too much about save situations. But that's all working towards the goal of save situations in October.
Yeah, and sticking with the bullpen, Tommy Kahnle's in OKC now. He pitched. Positive reports from him, throwing 94, 96 range. Victor Gonzalez, positive reports so far. He's also in the 94, 95 range and looked good. So those two guys might throw a wrench into some plans. Danny Duffy could throw a wrench into some plans. Realistically, I mean, I don't know if you feel the same way, but it's more still like Kahnle, Gonzalez, and Duffy. I don't think Duffy's going to be there anyways, but Kahnle and Victor Gonzalez, I think for me, it's kind of a long shot for them to make it or find a way onto the roster unless there's some kind of, and this might be obvious, but some kind of implosion by one of the guys that's already there. Because I think once Trinan comes back and Bigford's down, and then once Kershaw comes back and they decide what to do there, I think they're in a good spot with their bullpen in terms of guys that have been good and consistent the entire season so far.
Yeah, I do think it's going to be hard for most of those guys to actually crack this bullpen in any meaningful way. And I could see the Dodgers, saying, hey, Phantom IL for this guy for a couple weeks in September just to manage workload, and so maybe guys get some time on the roster that way. But in October, oh, and by the way, I did confirm what we talked about last night, that with the two added players to the roster on September 1st, only one of them can be a pitcher. So they will need to make some moves. So Phil Bickford, nice knowing you, I guess. But yeah, it's going to be hard for these guys, especially, Victor Gonzalez hasn't pitched all year. Tommy Kahnle's only thrown a couple innings. Like, no matter how well they pitch in rehab assignments, and even if they do get time on the big league roster in September, it's like, how much can you really prove when you haven't pitched all year? They definitely, it's still worthwhile to get them back, get them ready so they can, be in October, they can be at the Stay Hot camp in Arizona or whatever, so that if somebody does go down with an injury, they have those guys who can step in. But I think they're going to want to go with guys who have proven themselves over the course of much more of the season in October.
Yeah, and I agree there. So, like I said, we'll see. I mean, there could be a surprise, there could be a shock, there could be, with the Dodgers, there's always some kind of injury that ends up working itself out. But either way, we'll see how all that goes. I think that's all we got for today's episode, Jeff. Unless you got anything else.
No, we've got an off day tomorrow, so we'll have plenty of time to talk about other things. The schedule for next year came out. We'll talk about that. We've got, the Dodgers are 41-9 in their last 50 games, so we may compare it a little bit to their other great 50 game stretches from 2017 and 2013, and maybe get some mailbag questions too. But that's all for tomorrow.
Yep, that's for tomorrow. So that's what we'll be. Thank you for listening to Locked On Dodgers. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day every day. Check out Locked On MLB with our buddy Sully. He's got the number one daily league-wide podcast, Locked On MLB, where he brings passion and a unique perspective on every team and the biggest stories around. You can find it wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, simply by searching for Locked On MLB, similar to how you can find us wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. You can also search for Locked On Dodgers on Twitter and Instagram, and you'll find us there. You can find Jeff on Twitter at Snider. You can find me at Vince Samperio. DMs are open on all those accounts if you need to get a hold of us for questions, comments, concerns, or anything of that liking. You can also get a hold of us via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or voicemail text at 323-863-5625. It's 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car or if you're at home. Tell your smart device play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.